Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Wilson.
And I'm Chris Empey.
And this is Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we are jumping in today with our first episode in our series about diesel fuel.
You know, Paul, when we were coming up with all the different episode ideas, I was like, fuel tanks, really? Like, how many questions could we possibly ask about fuel tanks? But then I thought about it. Like, that's the start of everything, right? That's where fuel gets added. That's where, everything starts. So, I'm really excited. We have on S&B today to talk about, fuel tanks and the different applications and the design and what goes into it.
I never cared about a fuel tank until way back in the day. I had that C4500 and it was leaking out of the top of the fuel tank, out of the sending unit. And so I would pull into the parking lot, slam on my brakes, and then back into the parking spot. And finally, one of the mechanics one morning walked out, was like, "Hey, asshole, you're leaving a trail of fuel every day right here."
You didn't care about no money then. You were just like,
sure, right. No kids, no wife. I was like, let's do it. But it was funny that I literally never thought about a fuel tank.
Yeah.
It never crossed my mind. And there's so many things about it that because I don't have experiences that leave me needing a bigger fuel tank. It's just something I didn't think of, but it is something I think a lot of people have questions about.
Well, I think too, you take a young diesel owner, right? You get into the diesel space, you want to have a fast, cool truck. In the earlier days, you wanted to blow a little smoke, right?
Sure.
Unfortunately, it's just the ignorance in the space. You grow over time. So you get into, I want a multi-purpose vehicle, hot rod, work truck, daily driver. Gets decent fuel mileage compared to a gas engine.
Yeah.
And then as time progresses, maybe that same truck could live 3 or 4 different lives in the ownership of you having the truck. Now you're in your 30s. Now you have a family. Now you're going to use the truck to tow. And if, let's say, you had an older Duramax with only a 26-gallon tank and you're going to tow a camper trailer, across state lines, that fuel's not getting you very far. So that 26-gallon tank in that older truck that worked really, really well in your early teens, late teens, isn't working for you in your early 30s.
That's right. Absolutely. So we had a lot of questions. So we brought an expert on. So we'll be talking to Ryan McClanahan from S&B Filters or S&B Tanks here in just a moment. A real quick shout out to our sponsors, Duramax Tuner, home of Calibrated Power, home of Duramax Tuner, where we work full-time every day. We have a huge March mega sale going on right now. It is 15% off custom tuning, 10% off stealth turbos. There's some exclusions on that. There's also some killer doorbuster deals.
Yeah, we have a 6-speed conversion offering, and we have 2020 Ford switch-on-the-fly tuning at half off.
That's right, man. Yeah, so it's a big month over there. If you're looking to learn more details, jump on over to DuramaxTuner.com or give Chris a call.
Yeah, 815-568-7920, extension 2121.
Absolutely. And, of course, we also are happy to say that XDP, WC Fab, and Exergy Performance are all still strong sponsors of the podcast. We really do truly appreciate everything they do for the show. You can support us by supporting them. Visit their respective websites or give them a call at your earliest convenience. Stick around. We got more Diesel Performance Podcast coming at you in just a moment. All right, folks, we are here with Ryan McClanahan. Do I got that right?
Exactly.
Excellent, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm in new product development and business development over here at S&B. Paul reached out and said he had some questions on some fuel tank stuff, and happy to hop on the podcast and hopefully clarify and tie up some loose ends for some of your listeners about might be considering an aftermarket fuel tank for their truck.
Yeah. I mean, I think we should start this like everything. Give us a little background about you, diesel, just motorsports in general. What's that background on your end look like?
Yeah, so grew up in a family that raced a bunch of cars. And I kind of went a different direction and started getting into diesel. And my first truck was an 0360 that I bought for $6,000 and blew the head studs out of it. Never blew the head gaskets out of it within probably 2 months. And at 15 years old, had the cab off and did a full cab off head stud job kind of to get my feet wet. Then owned a couple Duramaxes after that, then got into the Cummins side of things and then kind of opportunity presented itself at S&B, and it made a ton of sense to kind of do what I enjoyed doing on my own time, but then also get paid to do it. So I've been over here in product development and kind of helped myself and Cayman Carter was also integral in the tanks department here. And so we just got into this about 3 years ago, but it's been really fun to kind of watch it grow and kind of make a name for ourselves in the tanks industry.
Cool.
That's great, yeah, because when I think of S&B, I know I definitely think of the filters, right?
Yeah.
Because we use cold air intakes on pretty much all the trucks we work with. How long has S&B been doing aftermarket fuel tanks?
We started in 2019. So it's the same. Rotational molding was kind of the intro for us. So we rotomolded all of our intake boxes and our tubes. And the tanks are made the same way, just obviously on a much bigger scale. So we already had the machinery, and it was kind of a no-brainer. The customers are the same exact customers that are buying a cold air intake kit. The dealers are the same dealers. So we jumped in head first and launched our first tank the summer of 2019, getting into the 11 to 16, 6-7 power strokes, as well as the 17 and up crew cab short beds. Those were our first two to hit the market, and we've definitely learned a lot, and our tanks have changed a lot since those first two came out. But it's been an awesome experience, and we've learned a ton, which has been fun.
Yeah, just a couple of years here. Pretty rapid growth, I would say. Anytime we're talking about tanks, I know I definitely hear the S&B options come up. One thing I have a hard time with, because I don't do a lot of cross-country driving, is like I don't have like a personal story about how much it sucks to pull over every 2 hours to have to fill up the tank, right? It's not a problem I deal with personally.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through, like, what is the problems that an aftermarket tank is solving for customers?
Yeah, so our core customers are the guys who are using their trucks for what they're made to do. Towing a big fifth wheel, towing a heavy trailer, and just adventuring and going across the country. Whether that's going to campsites or it's towing their pulling truck to competitions or whatever it is. But when you're getting 7 to 8 miles to gallon towing in a lot of these new diesel trucks, and if your truck came with a 30-gallon tank, you're not going too far, especially once you're out in kind of the remote areas where there's only a fuel station every 40 or 50 miles. There's guys that are having to stop, every 120 miles or every 100 miles, and it's just a pain in the butt for them. So that's kind of where we see ourselves solving the problem.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that I think about when you start talking about bigger tanks, right, is in the design itself.
Yeah.
Okay. What does some of that look like? Like S&B's angle on developing a tank, and are these tanks all like drop-in replacements? Like any DIY guy can do this? Like, what's some of the background there going into the tanks that are currently on the market?
Yeah, so we put a bunch of development resources into making sure there's no trimming, there's no cutting, no modification. So it's just all plug and play. And we pride ourselves a lot on that. And so, we get a truck in, we do a scan, we develop the tank. We'll probably do 7 or 8 installs ourselves before, the thing ever hits the market, sometimes more than that. So we're invested in making the install easy too, because we got to do it a bunch before the consumer ever gets a chance to do it. So we're all about the guys with grease under their fingernails in their driveway, putting tanks in with ratchet straps. And I'll tell you, we get a ton of guys who are doing that these days just because the install's that easy on all of our tanks.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things that struck me is like a transfer tank, right? Going straight into the bed and then either doing a gravity feed or a self-fill, with like the little pump. Why not go that route? Why go with an aftermarket tank compared to one of those? They seem like they were pretty readily available, and a lot of them out there with different options to choose from.
Yeah, and there's kind of a couple points to hit on here when you compare a slip tank in the bed to a midship replacement, which is what we call the underbody fuel tanks that we make and a couple competitors do. The big cons to putting a tank in the bed, obviously space. So on the short bed guys, I had a 2013 Cummins that doesn't even have a 6.5 foot bed. It's 6'4". Then I had a 100-gallon tank back there. Well, you can't even get a dirt bike in the bed now and ever think about closing the tailgate. So that's a big con, especially if you're a short bed guy with a slider hitch. Good luck, cramming all that in there too. If you're trying to tow a fifth wheel with your short bed, because my transfer tank hit my gooseneck hitch. I had to get the extension from B&W, which is kind of a pain in itself. And then the other side to hit on there is gravity feed. There's one company I know of that's making in-bed tanks that aren't gravity feed, and I would highly recommend that if you're dead set on going an in-bed tank route. The gravity feed will overfill the tank eventually, and you kind of have to make sure that you're turning that valve off when you're not driving and turning the valve on when you're driving, and it's just not really a perfect system. And then the other cons there also, you don't know how much fuel you have back there without dipping the tank most of the time. With the midship, you're going to be able to reuse your stock sending unit. The float's going to work. And on all the Ford trucks, the distance to empty can be recalibrated easily with the free service we offer with EasyLinks. So it's just the most OE plug and play kind of option is why we think a lot of our customers choose that route.
That is interesting because I know like the distance to empty and the knowing how much fuel I have in the tank, that's a big one when I was looking at this.
I mean,
like,
even we deal with customers, that do tanks, and we have to tune the LMLs and the Fords and FIPs and stuff like that, where they want that distance to empty to be accurate, right? They want it to be as OEM as possible, which is double the capacity.
Sure.
So
let's talk about that double the capacity. Double the capacity, I can double my distance between fill-ups. I'm also adding a lot of weight with all of that extra fuel. Have you found that like running at a full tank with, I think you guys do 60-gallon tanks, is that going to hurt my fuel mileage?
Yeah, so even we do a 70-gallon tank for the crew cab long bed Ford trucks. That's replacing a mid 40-gallon tank. So you look at it, you're really only adding, most of our tanks, I'd say you add 25 to 35 gallons. Diesel's around 7 pounds a gallon roughly. So you're looking at 210 pounds there, and then probably an additional 30 pounds in plastic in the tank itself. So all in all, it's kind of just like having, a full-size guy in the back seat on the driver's side. We've never really seen anything where the truck's lean or any gas mileage change. It's just having some tools in the back of your truck or whatever. 200 pounds really isn't a game changer on these 7,000 pound trucks. You're pushing 1,000 pounds of torque these days. So
I like it. I can hear you're a Ford guy. What kind of truck do you drive now?
I've got a 17 Super Duty now. So
okay, nice.
And I've gone all different directions, but I'm settled back in the Ford for the time being.
Now, when we're looking at the size of the tank, right? And you touched on the factory float and all that. So your sending, the level sending will work. There's not really the opportunity for the tank to become deeper, right? It's more or less like a wider, longer type fuel tank. Like, where are you guys going into as far as enlarging the tank itself?
Yeah, so that really depends on kind of the application itself. There's some trucks where it really is just an extension and we're only going 3/4 of an inch deeper. It basically all depends on what kind of the OEM engineers gave us as the template to start with. So there's certain tanks, like I said, we're 3/4 of an inch deeper and it's really just a lot longer. And in which case the float's still perfect. Right. We're using that OEM float. One that comes to mind is the 17 and up Ford tank. The crew cab short bed and crew cab long bed tanks are pretty much the same height. I think we're like an inch deeper. And they're just way longer on they go in front of the fuel cooler. The fuel cooler mounts in the middle. I don't know if you guys have seen that tank. So we were able to just lengthen it out. On some of the new L5Ps for the crew cab short bed tank. Well, they didn't give you any more room to go forwards now that the DEF tank's up there. So we had to drop it down a little bit more. And so in that case, there's going to be some fuel above the float. So you'll drive 200 miles or so with the gauge on full, and then it'll actually be accurate the rest of the way down, since the kind of shell of the tank, the outside of it's about the same size.
That'd make me happy. I know when I'm driving in the car, anytime I can keep it on full, I'm good. The minute it's off full, I'm like, gosh, shit, so that's kind of like one of those like mind tricks.
Yeah. Well, and you hit on another good point here. So if I'm extending my range with the fuel, are there any options to extend my range with DEF? Are there any aftermarket DEF tanks?
I honestly don't. I haven't seen anything for that application. I know there's a couple aftermarket options on the older Duramaxes to move the DEF tank down below, to relocate it from the ones that hung up front underneath that passenger door. But outside of that, I haven't really seen a lot of DEF tank offerings. But yeah, definitely something we should probably look into, because luckily, I mean, the DEF proportionally, I think on most trucks these days, it's probably 6 or 7 tanks of gas per DEF tank. So it's not the limiting factor. But yeah, if you could hit the DEF pump less, that would definitely be nice.
Now, when you have guys that are inquiring about a tank, what are some of like the common misperceptions that someone would have when doing some research and potentially looking at doing a tank in their truck?
I think the biggest misconceptions right now come around the distance to empty calibration stuff. Fortunately, the Fords have been really easy to get into, and EasyLink is offered, and Forescan both have easy ways to update the miles to empty calibration on the 11 and up Fords, all the way up to 2022 now. On the Chevys, I know you guys have had some experience with this. You have to actually reflash the truck. So it's not just in the instrument panel cluster like it is on the newer Fords. It's actually written into the tune. So it's a little more invasive for the end customer. You have to get EFI Live or some way to actually get a new calibration written. And then the Dodges, there's really, EasyLink hasn't been able to crack it. Alpha OBD's it's not the right way to do it. It moves the gauge with the distance to empty. There's some complications there. So I think the core of it right now is just people, everyone wants a plug and play, just light factory option. And unfortunately with the Dodge and the Chevy right now, it's just not as easy to get that as with the Ford. So that's probably the biggest question we get. And so it's good to clear that up for people, because I know we get asked that all the time.
I got to ask, which one's the most popular? Is it the GM guys, the Ford guys, the Ram guys?
It's the Ford one right now. The GM and the Ram are definitely in tight contention though. They're gaining steam. We launched the Ford first, so it's got an unfair advantage.
So it's got its momentum at this point, right? It's got its momentum.
We'll blame it on that.
Is this something that you guys are seeing an increased demand for now that fuel is starting to skyrocket in price? Are guys starting to really say, hey, it's getting expensive, I'm gonna go out and buy a bigger tank? Has it not made a difference for you guys at all?
Well, especially, I feel like we see it more out here than anywhere else. We're in California, in Southern California, and we have a bunch of guys, ton of customers that have places on the river over by Arizona, and tow their toy haulers down there on the weekends. And I was there last weekend, and fuel here right now is $7 and change. Over in Arizona, it's still $4.90. So they buy it, and Arizona is always about $1.50, $2 under California, thanks to our taxes here. So we have a ton of customers that'll buy it, head over there for the weekend, grab a full tank, tow their toy hauler back, drive for the week, and then repeat and just always do their fill ups over in Arizona. And they love it, and they can pay back that tank pretty quickly when you do the math on 60 times 2, $120 a week. So it's easy to do the ROI there.
No, I mean, especially, I never thought about it like that. Like being in a specific location, like you guys in California, prices of fuel are more.
Sure.
And then you have a vacation home, you have something like that. Or maybe you work and you're frequently traveling to a different location. Having that bigger tank just pays for itself.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm such a cheap ass and so bad at math that I feel like I would just see the bill every time I filled it up and just it hurts. But like you said, I mean, if you're looking at it, my other option is to pay $2 a gallon more. That's crazy, right? So of course.
I have to ask the question, who would be a customer who is a potential non-customer for a fuel tank? Like, in what position would someone be where you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't for you? Is it a truck that sits a lot, a truck that sits short driving, or is it really this benefits anyone that's looking to not stop at the tank as often?
Yeah, well, I'm obviously biased, so I would say that everyone ever needs an S&B tank. But really, if you're driving, 5 miles to work and back every day, never really towing with your diesel, then it's probably not a great investment for you. You're not going to see a bunch of benefits because you're getting 400 or 500 miles on the stock tank. That's going to last you a long time if you drive 10 miles a day. I drive 1,000 miles a week probably, so it definitely helps me out. I can reduce my fill ups and fill up once a week instead of 2 or 3 times when I didn't have a tank in my truck. So
1,000 miles. What the fuck are you driving 1,000 miles a week for? That's hot shotter numbers.
He's going to Arizona. He's going to Arizona filling up. You just said it.
I'm on the road all the time. It works out well having that tank down there. Definitely pays for itself.
What can we look forward to in the future from S&B tanks?
We're just going to continue to expand our applications. Basically, we've got a bunch of stuff in the pipeline right now for the long bed Duramaxes. We've kind of been lacking there, as well as some of the older long bed Dodges. And then for the OBS guys, we've got some big stuff in the works. I know they sometimes feel left out and forgotten about, but we started doing some scans last week, and we were on the phone all week with the guys over at CP Addict and getting they're scratching their brains for what we need to do for these OBS guys. So I think we've drawn up a great plan, and I'm pretty pumped for that one.
Man, that's exciting.
Very
I know
cool.
we're definitely excited to see what else comes out. If people wanted to learn more about your guys' tanks, where should they go?
Yeah, our website, just sbfilters.com. We've got a drop down on the top for fuel tanks, and that will take you over to our fuel tank landing page. Or you just give us a call anytime. We're happy to walk you through any questions you have on the phone. Our number is at 909-947-0015.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Was there anything that you were hoping to talk about today that we haven't covered so far?
No, I think you guys hit the nail on the head with those questions there. That's pretty much the core of, we get to talk to a bunch of potential customers and hear it ourselves too. And I think, we've gone through pretty much all the questions we get, which is good. Hopefully we can educate some customers and help sell more S&B tanks.
I'm excited. I know one way to find out. Guys, if you're watching this or listening, jump on over to our Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. Post some questions on there, and we will get them over to Ryan and try to get you guys answers as quick as we can. For today, this has been Paul Wilson.
Chris Emke.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, guys, I am here with Jeremy Garnett, our favorite super tech in the shop. Jeremy, how the hell are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. We are talking about all things fuel for the next few weeks here.
Right.
And you and I have been discussing this topic where, again, maybe I think this one might end with some open-ended questions, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure some of this stuff out to where, like, lift pump heaters. How much of an impact does a lift pump heater make? What kind of problems does it solve?
Right.
How does it work? And this is something that I know very little about. My experience with lift pump heaters has not been great.
Yeah, mine either. So I've installed different types and seen different types. So like I'm doing a couple now, so let's talk.
Yeah, can you walk our audience through what is a lift pump heater and what is the basic premise of what is it supposed to do?
So what I'm doing now is I'll explain the easy ones. I'm doing one now, and it's a 2-element. So this particular unit has 2 places, so I'm able to put 2 elements in it because we get colder weather here.
Yeah, sure.
So the idea behind it is, that I know of, is that you key on, it powers up the elements very quickly and heats up the actual unit and the fuel that's in the filters and the unit itself before it actually sends the fuel to the engine.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions about this. Now, and this may be something that we have to bring on a lift pump manufacturer to really explain the ins and outs of, but my general thought is, like, your lift pump, on a lot of lift pumps, they sit down below the truck, and the filter and the water separator sit down below the truck, and that filter holds fuel in it.
Right.
So if you're in a really, really cold climate, I've seen just the filter itself actually get the paraffin wax actually start to crystallize, and it gels up. That's what we call it, right? So you'll hear people on the Facebook groups and in the forums say, go put a heater on it.
Right.
Well, a heater is basically like a heated blanket.
I've seen blankets around the filters, or this is an element that goes into the unit.
It actually goes inside of the unit.
Yeah, this goes inside the unit.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that feature. But either way, I have to put that element into some sort of metal orifice, heat the metal, which then heats the fuel inside of it, or heat the plastic and then heat the fuel inside of it. So I've always wondered, like, man, it's really cold outside. If I have an older truck, I maybe have 3 working glow plugs, if I'm lucky. And now I sit there with the key on, and I let this electric heater heat up the lift pump. Man, how long could that take?
Yeah, that's the question, right? So I know, like, I've seen in the past where guys actually have blankets on that filters itself. And that's the same scenarios to a relay, or if they get really creative, they actually plug it into a 120, an extension cord.
Okay, yeah.
And I can see that working better than, your 12-volt system off your truck. But yeah, it's the idea behind it is that it heats the fuel very quickly. And the idea is that the fuel actually gets colder when the pump's actually working. And I know this by experience because I went out and tested not a actual element that goes into the heater, but a blanket heater.
Okay, yeah.
So I took my gun out there and I put it on the pump, and it's 32 degrees. Well, the pump starts working, the pump got down to 24 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Without a heater.
Okay.
So, and I know with the element heater that it maintains, a certain temperature. It doesn't get any colder, but it doesn't get any colder. So I don't know, and I can't tell you, so that's why we're talking about it, right? So,
I mean, the general idea is solid. Is we know the lift pump is a point in the system that could gel up. Right. So we need to address that. And also, I would imagine warmer fuel is going to have less issues as we start to go up
Right.
past the pump, right?
Yeah.
So if you have gelled fuel in your tank, it's still possible for the pickup in a stock truck to
Right.
just pick up some of that gel and send some of that paraffin wax into the
Yes.
actual fuel system. So if my lift pump has a heater in it, at least I'm preventing that.
Right.
That I'm not going to get any gel past the lift pump. It's going to catch everything
And
there.
I think that might be the idea behind it, because like I said, I know it doesn't get any warmer.
Right.
Once the pump starts working, I've personally seen it get colder. I have not, I'll know, I'm going to test it on this truck.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let it sit outside, and I'm going to grab my gun and I'm going to check it,
Yeah, this is one of those that I think there's an opportunity to learn something.
Yeah.
here,
And
right?
that's why we're talking about it. you know?
Absolutely. Listeners, viewers, guys, we would love to hear from you. Send us a message over at our Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. Tell us about your stories and your experience with lift pump heaters. I'm really, really interested to see what's going on out there in the wild. Who has this helped? What problem has it fixed? What do you guys think about it?
Yeah.
Get a
Different
hold
types of
us.
heaters.
Yeah.
Different types. So I'd like to see it.
Absolutely. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. I know this was a quick one. We're going to have you back on next week and be talking about more things fuel related.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today, guys. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Get fucking
Get swole.
Flex Friday. Let's go, bitches.